Hello, my beautiful, gorgeous dance baby, and welcome to another episode of More Than Dance. Today, we are going to be discussing the moment of momentum and momentum in general. And I want to talk about this because we touched on it an episode or two ago, and I want to make it very clear that we are always, when we're learning something like dance, creating momentum. And oftentimes, like when we're dancing, even if we're not learning something, let's say that we're not a beginner dancer, let's say that we are a professional dancer, there's still a moment of momentum. I think about this in terms of performances. And when we're getting ready for a performance, there's the moment where we're really, really working hard, that stage, that gritty stage. And then we have this turnover moment where we really feel the momentum, like, oh, we got this, we're moving through it. And even the choreography process, like with me, like it's like, okay, I have these ideas, and then it just starts to flow and hit. And each future moment is fueled by its prior moment. And I just love when that happens because it's a really fun time to try things and to do things because you're already in a flow state. So before we get there, let's backtrack a little bit and discuss what about momentum? What is momentum? Momentum is the buildup of energy through repeated activity or repeated movement. If you can just think about this visual of here you are and you're behind a gigantic boulder and you're starting to push it, and it's just taking so much effort for the boulder to even budge. And there's so much of you that's being expended. You're working, you're putting force, you're using your strength. You ate really well before you were going to do it so that you could feel really nourished. You hydrated. You took all these steps to be able to move this boulder, and yet there's resistance and there's something pushing back on you. And sometimes in life, that pushback is fear, obviously, comparison, obstacles, having a hard transitioning into a new body. Maybe you just had a baby, new work schedule. There's so much that comes to push back on you that challenges you and what you're doing. So in this case, yeah, we're pushing a boulder and we're being met with the exact, if not more, amount of momentum from the other side. And this quantum field is pushing back on you. And right now, you're meeting it with the same exact force. And when momentum starts is when you decide that you're going to push harder and you're going to move faster and more than this other side to create something that changes. And when it does, you're able to use that momentum as if you have another skill set added to you. So it's like you're using your strength, you're using your force, you're using all that stuff. Well, now when you have momentum in your favor, you get to use that too. And if you were to stop and start again, you'll hear in a couple other episodes, we talk about interruptions and detours. That's going to stop you with your momentum. In this case, we're talking about the idea that we have that going for us. So why not use it? A good example of momentum in dance is when you go from relying on the counts to understanding that, oh, I can have both. I can have the counts and I can understand the musicality with beats and with lyrics. Another example is when you're able to rely on your muscle memory. And instead of learning a new move from scratch, you can rely on things you already know about another move and apply those rules and tactics to this new move, especially in terms of alignment or making transitions or moving fast enough with the strongest dynamic for each move. When we talk about momentum in terms of your emotional state or your mental state, it's a little different. Momentum is not really about motivation. Momentum is not really about, I feel inspired, so therefore I'm going to do this. Momentum is more like a silent celebration. We talked about this before in episode 3 about the ugly stage, embracing the cringe, right? We talked about maybe you haven't seen the elevation quite yet, but you're on the brink of it. Momentum is doing the thing even when you don't want to do the thing. And then it becomes that doing it is easier than not doing it. Momentum is understanding resistance and meeting it where it's at. So we talked about this idea of you're working really hard on something and yet you don't have anything to show for it. It looks as if potentially you haven't done anything towards it. I see this a lot with my couples when I'm working with them. Like they'll come in and we'll work so hard on all these moves and like so much is being learned that nothing is clicking. And I always tell them about the soup. We're making a dance soup. You're just putting in ingredients. You got to let it stew. And then it's so true that like within a few weeks with them, like all of a sudden they're just like pumping out these moves. And it's so cool and it's so amazing. And they're always so surprised because they're like, oh my God, I actually get it. And that's momentum because here you are doing something, which leads to you doing more, which leads to you feeling good about what you've just done. So therefore you do more. And it just creates this endless cycle of, wow, like I'm really in it. I'm really doing it. The moment though, before this happens, we get to get really clear on how to be in that state because the resistance doesn't feel good. And that's important to remember. The resistance is going to come back at you and it's going to be like, yeah, you're not equipped with this. Do you even deserve to be able to do this? The imposter syndrome, all of the stuff that gets us questioning ourselves is going to come and it's going to shine itself into our face like a mirror, a big confrontation. And unfortunately, if we don't have the skills, it's going to be really hard to push back. And since you've been listening to this podcast, you're going to have the ability to have all of these skills because all of them are going to help you to push back on resistance. Resistance, don't forget, is disguised in fear. It's disguised in the ability to be vulnerable, which leads to you asking better questions, which leads to you working through some really hard things. Foundations can be really hard sometimes because sometimes we want to jump into dance and just learn. I just want to learn the choreography. And then sometimes my students will realize, oh my gosh, this is so much deeper than I thought. This is so much harder than I thought. I really need to get a grasp on foundations. Foundations can be fun. And it also can be very frustrating when it's like, oh my gosh, these are the stepping stones that I need to do what I really want to do. So it requires patience. So resistance can come up as, hey, you got to be patient. You got to do your time. You got to understand a couple things before you do the thing you really want to do. The awkward stage, the clunky stage, sometimes I call it the sticky stage. It's kind of like where it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's icky, it's cringy, it doesn't feel good, right? It's when we're almost in the groove, but we're not. That's what before momentum is like. Momentum is also fueled by action. So think about that. Like if you've ever planned something before, it's like, cool, you have all these great ideas. Well, it doesn't actually go into fruition until you start making plans about those ideas. Start emailing people to let them know you've got this really cool idea, or you're planning a party, or thinking about the possibilities of, I really want to learn this dance routine, and yet you haven't signed up for a dance class. Or maybe you want to surprise your significant other with a special routine. Well, how are you going to do that when you're not a dancer and you haven't signed up for a class? You've got to start somewhere. So sometimes momentum is taking the step in the right direction. Remember how I told you when I first started this podcast, my little bit of momentum was buying the equipment. It was just getting an opportunity to start a little bit. And momentum feeds off of other things too. So that one tiny, tiny, tiny step was tiny, but that combined with other tiny, tiny steps makes a difference. So sometimes it can be hard when all we want is momentum and we don't understand how to make it for ourselves. And that's when we get to examine more of our resistance and our fears. And are we self-sabotaging? Are we going all in? Because don't forget, once we go all in, that's where the real true magic happens. That's where it lies. Momentum is a gigantic aspect of that. When you go in, think about it. everything starts to click. You're making connections. You're making connections in terms of people, yes, but what I meant was you're making connections to other things that you're learning. So there's this trickle effect of things being connected, and your brain is just so excited about everything that it's taking in that in itself is momentum. Even the idea of being able to make connections to other things, that's momentum. When that thing is so hard and you're meeting it back up with the same level of intensity, like, I see you, I see that you're hard, and I'm choosing to continue and go forward with it. I'm making that decision. It's strategic on my end. I'm going to keep going. And then guess what happens? This little layer releases, this little window lifts up, and there's light. It's kind of like the world bouncing back to you and saying, like, all right, I see you. I see you working for this. I'm going to show you a little glimmer of where you're going. And when we get to see that light and we get to kind of feel that progress, because remember, progress is never going to show itself soon. Progress is always going to be like, keep working, work harder. Progress starts to show later. Once it knows you're committed, it's going to be like, okay, yeah, keep trying. And then once it sees you're committed, it's going to be like, okay, you deserve this. A little glimmer of light. Little tiny one. And then you're like, okay, I see it. And you're so eager at that moment because you've gone all in and you're seeing a little bit of momentum. You're like, oh, I see it. Oh, that feels good. I always think that the world and the universe is like asking you to like really show that you want it before it gives anything back. What I was talking about also, like with the obstacles, like it's way more fun when you've achieved something after going through obstacles. It's like, wow, I really did that. It's the same with progress. If progress came like right away and you could see it so easily, you'd be like, that was easy. Instead of, wow, I really get to work hard for this thing. How much cooler is it later when you've really seen progress? It would be cool if it showed itself earlier. Usually I can see it earlier on my students. I always see progress before my students see it. And it's okay because it's you know, it's something that's just natural. Like I'm sure like my teacher would say that about me and I'm not seeing it or feeling it. Another Socratic seminar for us to have of like progress and where it shows up. And I think if we're aware enough, we can find it. And that's just it. We get to find it versus it just like being like, hey, progress, look at this. And so the act of it showing itself to us when it does, it's like, yes, I earned that progress. I worked hard for that, even if it's just this much. And it always makes us excited for more. Progress in dance is tough to see because it doesn't show up all at once. So for example, it's going to show itself in maybe your arm that day was just on, but then your footwork, you forgot it maybe a little bit. So it's like not all the dots will be connected at the same time. Sometimes it could be, but other times we get to kind of examine our body because don't forget, we've talked about the idea of like everything for a dancer is a multitude of elements. It's not just how we're dancing. It's how are we portraying our dance to the audience. It's also how is our emotion. It's also how are we connecting with the musicality? Because when we're authentic, we're seen as authentic. And when we're fake, it's not going to feel like a realistic experience for the audience. And that's usually what we want. So our progress as a dancer is usually in tiny, tiny things. So we get to also train how we see our progress. And once we learn how to train that, we're going to get momentum and we're going to be able to see and feel how we can create more of those moments within a class or within a month's time or within a performance that we're doing. Or even like connections that you're making with other dancers in terms of community or even in terms of auditioning or even in terms of getting yourself seen if you're trying to, book gigs. So just like this idea that when we have fear, we learn to bring it with us, it's the same as when we have a glimmer of progress, we want to learn how to take that with us. It's also this idea of doing and continuing to do without the recognition or the validation of something happened right after. It's understanding the timeline that these things take time. And if we got used to the idea that like after everything that we've worked on, we should be able to see XY results, that's not really true. Like there's definitely successes to be found. And I do train my students to always think of a success within a class because that's another way to continue the momentum and to really see things. And you'll notice maybe not within 2 class times, but within a year's time, they're like, whoa, I actually got this. Even like sometimes like I have a particular student who she's been taking with me for some years now. And just this year, she started to say things like, I killed that routine. And I'm like, yeah, you did. And she would always kill the routine, but she would never be able to say that in prior conversation. And so even that is a gigantic progress, but that didn't happen from one class to the next. It happened over the course of time. So we don't want to feel like we need to have motivation to make our first move or to be able to create this momentum. We want to think about it in terms of, I'm just going to do, and I'm going to keep doing, whether or not I have that direct feedback back to me that says, good job, you did it. I'm going to keep doing it because I know that with the repetitions, it's going to get there. If you can understand that the repetitions are what make everything, then you're going to get the repetitions in. You're just going to be like, okay, this is just 1 rep. Let me get it in. Doesn't matter what it is. And since we've already talked about be, do, have, this next question can be also very helpful when you're trying to create momentum. What would I do if I was already in motion? How would I act? How would I go about my dance classes or what I'm working on in this current class? And that question is like asking you to be in the moment of momentum. Well, when we're in the moment of momentum, we already know that there's a sense of ease that's happening. There's a shield of heaviness that's like lifted off and we're getting in the flow. We're kind of feeling ourselves a little bit. So can you put yourself in that position and start to feel like, ooh, okay, that's what I would feel like in momentum. Remember when we talked about when you're feeling stuck? Stuck doesn't do a good job at encouraging you and telling you, you got this. It's getting unstuck that does. So before you feel that momentum, chances are you've felt a feeling of being stuck. You feel the resistance, and sometimes that's connected with feeling stuck. And what we do to get out of that is to teach ourselves that, hey, I gotta keep going. Whether I see a result now or 10 days from now, I just gotta keep going. And that comes with also trusting the process. Trusting the process, I mean, I'm sure you've heard that phrase so many times. It's sometimes can be one of those phrases that's like kind of annoying, like, oh, trust the process. It's just, and it's true at the same time. And that's what makes it probably so annoying, is that it is so true. And you know it's true deep down. You're like, yeah, she's right. And how easy it is to just be like, okay, but what if, but all the fear questions that you have. What if it doesn't work for me? What if this process isn't my process? Trust the process. Because trusting the process is what feels like kind of this like woo-woo thing, like trust the process. In actuality though, scientifically, the process is a scientific process. The science of getting better at dance is dancing more. And that's trusting the process. So if you need that logic as a human, if you need to be like, yeah, how do I trust the process though? Like, I'm not like a woo-woo trusty person, then how do I trust it? Well, you trust it because it's backed by data. And here's the data. Doing more reps makes you better. Being in a room with an instructor that's skilled at teaching is going to make you better because the feedback you're going to get is going to be getting you closer to your goals. That's real data. That's a system that works. So when you're thinking, how do I create momentum? There's a perfect system for you to try. Another thing that could be a great system is sticking to your schedule, despite when things get hard, despite when you're getting an interruption, keeping with your accountability and your routines. That's still a system. That's still going to allow you to create momentum. No, it's not directly like usually if you're hungry, like you're going to eat and now you're not going to feel hungry. It's not like keep to your schedule and boom, there's momentum. It's a little delayed. So trust the process that it's a little delayed and also trust that it will still get you there. And the last way that you can get into momentum is also allowing yourself to reframe any hesitation that you have. So this idea like, oh, it's not happening for me, or I haven't felt it yet, or I don't see this progress. It's, again, trusting the process, but knowing that you're about to level up. This is going to happen for you. Keep going. Keep making action steps forward. Because imagine like if you can picture, okay, so there we are again, we're behind this big boulder and we're pushing it. Well, maybe what you don't, because this boulder is so big, maybe what you don't see is that you're about to go down a hill and you're pushing so hard as if you're pushing uphill, but surprise, it's pushing downhill. So in about like just a little bit longer, just hold on a little bit longer and you're about to go downhill, which in this case is uphill in a sense, because downhill you're going to go faster and you're going to go through the momentum and it's just going to like build and build and build because we know physics. Then it's going to probably go up again and you get to work hard on a new level. And every time you're working on a new level comes resistance and comes things that you get to practice relearning and learning. More foundations, perhaps. So in dance, this is just everything. Understanding your momentum, understanding when to go hard. That's also going to add to your momentum, because let's talk about first like improvisation. I have so many students that come to the studio that are so scared of, very rarely is one of my students just excited about improvisation. I would say that doesn't ever happen. They're shy, they're nervous, they're feeling like whatever I do is going to look silly, like I don't want to feel that, I don't even know what to do. And then when they start doing it, when they start jumping in the pool and going all in, they're going to be like, okay, that wasn't actually as hard as I thought it was going to be. How funny. Or, wow, that felt better than I thought it would. Those little collections of thought, those create momentum too. When you surprise yourself, it's like, oh, wow, I did that. How about it? Or sometimes when we're sharing in class and we'll talk about like the routine and someone will say like, oh, that was so hard for me. And then, when you're having that moment, you're like, wow, that one, I kind of did okay with that one. That can be a nice moment for you to feel like, wow, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. That's the moment when things start clicking. And that is what creates your momentum. You realize you're doing it. So just to recap a little bit about momentum, we understand that momentum, you can't go out and get it. You can't just be like, I want to have momentum today. You get to earn it. And earning it means that you're meeting resistance with the same, if not more intensity as it's meeting you. The hardest part of creating momentum is when you're starting and you're not seeing results. It's when you're feeling stuck and you don't see that there's progress being made. The idea that we get to get used to creating momentum without the validation right away. In other words, we don't need to see the exact progress right away in order for me to continue to get the reps. And to remember that momentum is what creates motivation, not motivation creating momentum. So right now, I invite you to find where you are in your dance journey. Or of course, for my non-dancers, where are you in the skill that you are working on? And have you made certain steps towards building momentum? I invite you to find something that you can hold on to in terms of creating more momentum. So maybe that's staying so consistent with putting this practice into your schedule. Maybe this is understanding that it's not about getting it and it's just about getting the reps in. So maybe you sign up for a few more classes this month than you normally would. And then the last thing I want you to do is understand the question that I asked before of, if you are already in motion, what would you do next? So this moment that you're waiting for, where the momentum starts, it's already here. It just needs you to continue doing what you're doing. It needs consistency. And when you find that moment of momentum, you're going to be so glad that you continued to do things even though they were hard. You're going to be so glad that you continued to fight against the resistance, because once you've created a moment of momentum, you know exactly how to create another moment of momentum. And it also means that you have chosen to move forward with fear and that you've chosen to go all in. So I'm so excited for you and all the momentum that you are creating behind the scenes. Pretty soon you are going to see it and you will feel so fulfilled. If this was helpful for you today, I would love to ask you for a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the dance floor.